All right, everyone, welcome back for another deep dive with us. And today we're looking into something pretty huge.
Yeah.
AI is everywhere these days, but
Yeah.
it really makes you wonder who's actually in control of this stuff. Is it the big tech company, the governments, or could it even be us?
That's the big question, isn't it?
Yeah, and that's what we're going to try to figure out today. So to help us out, we're going to be taking a look at this episode of Trend Talk USA. They do a podcast all about future trends, and they have this really interesting episode called Who Owns AI? Google, China, or you?
Mm.
And I think they bring up some really good points that we can dig into.
Absolutely. And it's a timely discussion, too. I mean, AI is developing so rapidly that the question of ownership is becoming more and more pressing.
Exactly. So we'll break down the key takeaways from that episode
Yeah.
and kind of put our own spin on it. And hopefully by the end of this, we'll all have a better understanding of just how complicated this whole AI ownership thing really is. So are you ready to dive in?
Let's do it.
Okay, awesome. So one of the first things that Trend Talk USA brought up was this idea of an AI Cold War brewing between the U.S. and China, which sounds a little intense.
Yeah, it does have a kind of dramatic ring to it.
Yeah, right. But when you think about it, it kind of makes sense. China's making these huge moves. They've pledged something like $50 billion to achieve AI dominance by 2030.
Yeah, and it's not just about the money, it's about their approach.
Whoa.
They're really going all in with this centralized strategy. They're building these smart cities from the ground up just to gather massive amounts of data to train their AI.
Which is pretty wild when you think
Yeah.
about it. Like, they're literally designing their urban landscapes with AI in mind.
Exactly. It's a level of integration that we just don't see in most other countries.
Yeah, and the U.S., they're taking a very different approach. They're basically putting their faith in Silicon Valley, the whole free market innovation thing.
Yeah, the thinking is that if you let the private sector run wild, the best ideas will rise to the top and they'll outcompete everyone else.
Right, and they're not exactly slouching in terms of investment either.
Yeah.
Companies like Google and OpenAI are attracting billions of dollars in venture capital.
Absolutely. I mean, the amount of money flowing into AI research and development in the U.S. is staggering.
So you've got these two completely different approaches. China with this top-down centralized model and the U.S. with this bottom-up kind of free-for-all.
Yeah.
And I guess the question is, which one is going to be more effective in the long run?
It's really hard to say. At this point, both approaches have their own strengths and weaknesses. China's centralized approach might give them a short-term advantage. They can move quickly and decisively.
Right.
But it also runs the risk of stifling creativity and innovation. If everyone is following the same playbook, you might miss out on those groundbreaking ideas that come from left field.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Whereas the U.S. system is more chaotic, but it also allows for more experimentation and diversity of thought.
So it's almost like a trade-off, right?
Exactly. And it's a trade-off that goes beyond just technology. It speaks to different philosophies about how society should be organized, how much control the government should have versus individual freedom, all those big questions.
And that actually kind of leads into the next big thing that Trend Talk USA brought up, which was open source AI.
Ah, yes, the wild card in the AI ownership game.
Exactly. So for anyone who's not familiar with open source,
Yeah.
it basically means that the code behind the AI is freely available for anyone to use, modify, and distribute.
It's like taking the recipe for AI and putting it online for everyone to see.
Yeah, exactly. And
Yeah.
Trend Talk USA, they talked about this new AI model from Meta called Llama 3.
Right, Llama 3. Yeah.
And this is a big deal because it's a super powerful model, but it's also open source, which means that anyone, even someone without a ton of technical expertise, can potentially use it to build their own AI tools.
It's like giving everyone access to the building blocks of AI.
Which is pretty exciting, right? I mean, it
Yeah.
could totally democratize access to AI and lead to this explosion of creativity.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, imagine small businesses, artists, educators, all sorts of people being able to harness the power of AI to solve problems in their own unique ways.
Yeah, like maybe a local bakery can finally use AI to perfectly frost their cakes. Something that a big corporation would never even bother with.
Exactly. It opens up so many possibilities.
But of course, there's a flip side to this too, right?
Oh, definitely. I mean, whenever you make something this powerful freely available, there's always the risk of misuse.
Right.
Think about deepfakes getting even more sophisticated and harder to detect, or autonomous weapons systems falling into the wrong hands.
Yeah, those are some pretty scary scenarios.
And even with the best intentions in place, even if everyone is trying to use open source AI for good, there's still the challenge of control.
Right. Like, how do you ensure that something that's so widely accessible is also used responsibly?
Exactly. It's a question that we're still grappling with, and there are no easy answers.
which is kind of a perfect segue into the last big question we wanted to talk about, which is the role of startups in this whole AI landscape.
Ah, yes, the Davids going up against the AI Goliaths.
Exactly, because, you've got these massive companies like Google with their seemingly endless resources and armies of PhDs.
Thousands of them. Yeah. It's incredible the sheer scale of their operations.
Right, and then you've got these smaller startups like Anthropic and Stability AI who are doing some really innovative work, but they're obviously operating on a much smaller scale.
Right, and it's not just about the size of their teams, it's also the cost. TrendTalk USA mentioned that training just one large language model can cost upwards of $10 million.
Which is a mind-boggling amount of money for most startups.
Oh, absolutely. It's a huge barrier to entry.
So how do these startups even stand a chance?
Well, they have a few things going for them. First of all, they're agile. They can move fast, pivot quickly, and take risks that bigger companies might shy away from. They're also often driven by a strong sense of mission. They're not just trying to make a quick buck. They're trying to solve specific problems that they're passionate about.
So they're attracting a certain type of talent.
Yeah.
People who are drawn to that kind of environment.
Exactly. They're attracting the people who want to make a real difference in the world.
And maybe that's the key. Maybe in this AI landscape, it's not just about who has the most money or the biggest team.
Right.
Maybe it's about who can adapt the fastest, who can solve the problems that matter most, and who can build trust with users.
I think that's a really important point. In the end, the question of AI ownership might not be about who controls the technology, but who uses it responsibly and ethically.
Right.
And that's something that we all have a role to play in, whether we're developers, policymakers, or just everyday users of AI.
Okay, so it sounds like what we're really talking about here is not just who owns AI, but how we as a society are going to shape its development and its impact on the world.
Exactly. It's a conversation that we need to be having now, because the decisions we make today are going to have profound consequences for the future.
And on that note, I think we'll wrap things up here, but hopefully this has given everyone some food for thought. As AI continues to evolve, it's clear that the question of ownership is only going to get more complex and more important.
Absolutely. It's a topic that deserves our continued attention and thoughtful consideration.
Well said. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive, and we'll see you next time.
Until then, take care.
Bye. Bye.